Hi everyone. We're going to read two chapters of Polaris today because I think they're both kind of short chapters. So we're going to read chapter 20 and chapter 21. A revelation from the deep. Later that day, a fresh distraction reared its head, or their heads rather. Dolphins, called Aaron from the patched up rail. Henry rushed over for a look. He'd heard these creatures were uncommonly beautiful. He slowed as he neared the rail, though. The ship was pitching a bit at the waves, and there was nothing but rope between him and a fatal ducking. He gripped the rope tightly and peered over the side. He saw them immediately. With all its remaining sails set, the ship was kicking up white wake as it cut through the waves, and the dolphins were cavorting in the edges as if delighted by the sight of the breaking surf so far from shore. Henry counted quickly, but he decided there were 6 of them. Another one surged up from the deep to join them. He watched intently as the color of the last dolphin's skin shifted and lightened as it neared the surface and caught the sun's rays. At first it appeared green, then blue. Then it flashed all the colors of the rainbow as it broke from the water's grip and launched itself straight forward through the air. Henry gasped at the muscular marine mammal, blew out a spray of mist from the blowhole on top of its head. "That one's showing off," called Owen with delight as the dolphin splashed down. "Look who's talking," Emma called back. The whole crew laughed, save for Thatcher, who surveyed the action longingly from the back of the wheel. "Look at the baby," cried Maria. Henry swung his head back and forth until he saw it. Swimming alongside one of the dolphins, so close it could have been her shadow, was a tiny pup. It was just a few feet long, but already perfectly proportioned and the exact miniature of the rest of the pod. It swam nearly as well, tailing just a few feet behind its mother, and even rising to the surface to blow its blowhole when she did. Henry was hypnotized by the changing colors in their backs, and as they surged beneath the sunlight surface, he leaned forward over the side for a closer look, clutching the makeshift rope rail tightly. Suddenly, he felt a harsh push on the shoulder. "Ah!" he called out as he pitched forward towards the sea, but the same hand that had shoved his shoulders had already grabbed him tight. He swung his head around to see Aaron grinning at him. Why, you simple-minded, shifty-eyed son of a cur, you!" Henry stammered out his insults, which only made the others laugh louder. "Did you hear him scream?" said Maria. "It was a shout," protested Henry, having taken a deep breath now. "And anyway, he could have killed me." "Your last words would have been, 'Ah!'" said Owen, causing a fresh round of laughter. "No," said Henry, "I would have had some words with the dolphins. I would have told them that you were much better company." They laughed again, and this time Henry joined in, satisfied that he acquitted himself well in the exchange. But the good mood did not last, at least for Henry. As he turned back to the rail, the dolphins were already beginning to tire of the game. They were veering off the boat, off to pursue fresh frolics elsewhere in the deep. Henry watched them go. The last to leave was the baby, tailing a little bit further behind its mother now. Either it has way more of an appetite for play at its age, thought Henry, or it is a slower swimmer. But a moment later, the mother dolphin slowed herself, allowing the pup to catch back up. She's worried about it, he thought. She made so many dangers in the deep, and still so small, still only half grown. And then, that's when it occurred to him, as the sunlight played on the water before him, another much darker image flashed through his mind. He saw the creature again, but not all of it. He saw it was little half-formed arms waving in it, actually, from its midsection, still so small, still only half grown. He remembered that strange jelly-like coating dripping from the tips, and now it made sense to him. He had reminded him of the clear white of an egg, and he hadn't been far off. The whole creature was still forming, as sure as any farmyard chick, and the coating was a protective salve to ease the process along. He saw the whole creature now. The image was so clear and the realization so intense that he stumbled backward from the rail, his face slack and stricken. "You all right there?" said Aaron. "I must have given you a greater fright than I'd planned." Henry looked at him, blinking, trying to refocus his vision in the real world outside of his head. "Don't you see?" he said. "The creature—" At the mere words, the smiles fell from the faces of the others. "It's still growing too. Growing and changing." Henry desperately searched his mind for what he knew about ants, The first thing he thought of was their formidable strength, each one capable of carrying hundreds of times its body weight. Imagine something like that, the size of a person. Then he thought of the exoskeletons, the sheaths around their bodies, made of the same tough substance as lobster shells, and an armor against the world. And how thick would that armor be on an organism of that size? The creature's armor is still soft and wet, he realized. It is still vulnerable, clinging to the shadows for protection, as surely as a dolphin pup clings to its mother's side. But it wouldn't be vulnerable for long. Suddenly, he knew they had to do what they had to do. Don't you see? He said, turning from one inquiring face to the next. Then, finally, he pointed to the nearest boarded-up hatch. He understood now just how pathetic a gesture it was. Don't you see? He repeated. But they didn't, and so he had to spell it out for him. We have to kill it now. Chapter 21. The monster must die. Owen listened carefully as Henry explained it all. For a second time, they had gathered around Thatcher at the helm so that everyone could hear. Lord, help us all, thought Owen. But this frail boy is right. He understood that Henry was smart and educated, but he did he have to be so, he searched for the word, did he have to be so correct? It was maddening. So, each day, this thing gets stronger, said Owen. I believe so, yes, said Henry. It seems to be undergoing some sort of overall transfiguration. I saw the coating. It is as the white of an egg or the pus upon a wound, contributed to Thatcher. Yes, said Henry, considering it. Unpleasant, but yes. But how? Asked Aaron. I do not know, admitted Henry. I'm still puzzling it out. I think it has something to do with a fungus. A fungus? Said Maria. Yes, said Henry, like a mushroom, that sort of thing. They reproduce, casting spores upon the wind. And Ob has caught the wind of the fungus, then? Ventured Thatcher. Henry nodded. But why him? Asked Emma. Why not the rest of us? The group looked around at each other, avoiding eye contact. He's the one who took the doctor's chest down to the hold, said Thatcher, looking up suddenly. Your doctor's chest, he added, pointing to Henry. Henry was caught off guard, and Owen followed up before he could deny it. Yes, that was the last we saw of him. Perhaps he brought this fungus back from the jungle. It certainly is not like any fungus I've ever heard of. Henry looked pained, but didn't deny it. It is a vast and dark place in the Amazon, with countless species undiscovered. And remember what the old sailors whispered at night? Remember the tales they told, said Thatcher? A dreaded disease? And the beast in the darkness, added Maria. And now, it seems, we have a beast of our own, said Thatcher. But what of Ob? I saw his face. The monster was wearing it as its own. Is it still him? They turned to Henry for an answer. They all did. Perhaps in part, he offered weakly. How much is unknowable? But others refused to look away, and reluctantly he continued. I believe he is being consumed, taken over by the larger composite creature. He recognized a gun, for example, but he could not speak. Owen nodded. He had seen the same thing. So every day there will be less of him, he said, and more of the monster. Yes, admitted Henry, and every day the monster will be stronger, its armor thicker, its limbs longer, its claws sharper. But to what end? Asked Owen. If it no longer Ob, who controls the movements? What does? It must be the fungus, said Henry. I saw it in his mouth. It will be growing inside him as well. It is almost certainly in his brain. The fungus in the brain? Said Emma, horrified. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Henry nodded again. I have, in truth. I have heard of a fungus affecting the brain, causing changes in the host. It would not have undertaken such an elaborate transformation, such as a valuable incubation, without a reason. But again, what reason? Repeated Owen. What does it want? There was a heavy silence, and Henry formulated his reply. Owen tried to imagine the horror of the transformation. What must have been like for poor Ob? Did he understand what was happening to him? What was he thinking as he slowly lost control of his mind? As his body became something other than him and other than human. It wants the same things as all funguses, said Henry at last. He looked up at the sails, avoiding the eyes of others. And what is that? Asked Thatcher. Henry looked at him directly in the eyes. He let out a long, slow breath, and then he spoke. It wants to reproduce. There was a silence in the thunderstruck crew. As the thunderstruck crew processed this idea, the wheel slipped from Thatcher's hand, and for a few stunned moments he let it wander. By the time he had gotten hold of it and himself, the ship had ventured 4 full points off course. Oh no, 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 Aaron was saying. But this thing's manner of reproduction, Owen mumbled, struggling to find the words for such a repugnant a concept. I mean to say, the way it goes about. It is with other organisms, said Henry, with people. And we are the only other people on the ship, whispered Emma. Henry looked at her, then around at the others. It'll wait in the shadows. It'll grow stronger, and then, this time, it was Owen who cut him off, and then it will come for us. Henry nodded. And it will be strong, many times stronger than the strongest man. We will be powerless to halt at its advance. Wood and rope and even steel, nothing will have stop it. But what of a gun? Said Owen, looking down toward the pistol's belt. I don't know, said Henry. Think of an ant. The bullet would smash it, declared Aaron triumphantly. Now think of an ant the size of a man, its external skeleton perhaps several inches thick, and harder than the horns of a bow. Oh, said Aaron, slumping visibly. So we must strike now, said Owen. Henry looked up at him. Owen had hoped to see the resolve in his eyes, grim determination for what needed to be done, and certainly as to how to go about it, and said he saw only resignation and sadness. If it's not already too late, said Henry, but we must try at least. Either it lives or we do. The ship is too small. It cannot be both. There was silence, save for the whipping wind. It was Owen who broke the spell this time. Then it will be us, he said firmly. His bluster energized the others. The monster must die, cheered Thatcher. Huzzah! Called Emma. Maria set the plans in motion. We must fetch weapons, she said. Anything to strike at it. Owen saw her turn and take a few steps, off to fetch some sharpening thing or another, but he also saw her wince as she put her weight on the swollen bandaged foot, and he saw her limp as she dragged it forward another painful step. Not you, Maria, he said. She turned back toward him, pivoting on her good foot. What do you mean, she protested. I must do my part. I was a bullfighter in a past life. Owen had no idea how to respond to that. A bullfighter? You would only slow us down, he said, a few seconds in silence, and I believe you might be of more service up here. At the wheel, you mean? He looked at the sails and the horizon. Then the wind was light but steady and the sails mild. The wheel wasn't fighting Thatcher particularly. Owen shook his head. No, we can risk tying the wheel off again, at least for a bit, he said. We can fashion other instruments for you, deadlier ones. Maria smiled. He guessed that the bullfighter in her liked that idea. He smiled back, but it was forced. The wind was in the sails. The way was clear. They had food and water. It was going well, if you could ignore the fact that the boat was taking on water, sinking as it went, and there was an armor-plated, fungus-brained monster growing stronger each day and waiting to turn them all into its kin. He sighed heavily as Maria looked at the wheel, and so they began to make their preparations to go below once more, eyeing the sun above, working quickly but with great care. It would be their first trip between decks. But this time, he knew, they wouldn't be avoiding this fierce creature. They would be hunting it. That was it for chapter 21. Tomorrow we'll come back and read chapter 22 and find out what happens when they go on the hunt. Have a good day, everybody.